let's take a train, because you could call it a vehicle.
Yeah.
Or a transporter.
Yeah.
Or a train as an example. So what she would do is they would have you, they would talk to the child and they'd use one term of reference. Now I didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
So it was interesting because they'd use various terms of references through this little interview. And at the end of the interview, I said to the woman, I said, look, I think if you stuck to one term of reference for whatever you were talking about, I think it would be easier for you to get whatever you're trying to do. And she said, but what you don't know is this is the whole point. Actually, we're trying to see how they respond to different terms of reference for the same object.
Okay, yeah.
And it's quite interesting when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And the things that you see when you're sort of slightly set back, when you're in a scenario, when you don't know things are going on.
Yeah.
It's the things you observe. It was quite interesting, actually.
Would you mind directing me back to town?
Into town, yes. So, anywhere in particular you'd like to be?
No, just towards the city centre, just because I've never been down this way before and my phone won't do the two things at once.
Okay.
Apparently,
so we can go split. You can go either way to town from here. So when you get to the main road, you can decide whether you choose left or right, and then I'll direct you from there.
Ooh, that's cool.
Either
the one
way.
that's got most traffic, I guess, because it's called Let's Get Stuck in Traffic.
Well, if you want to get stuck in traffic, let's try and turn right.
Right, okay, cool.
Try and turn right.
God.
This is the worst junction to get out of the estate from. But actually, traffic's not too bad at the minute.
Yeah, I think we're just coming into peak times, aren't we?
Yeah, this is a horrid junction. Too many things going on here.
Yes. So you're a textile designer rather than artist usually?
Yeah, well that's what I trained as, a designer, not so much of an artist. So that's kind of how I see the world.
Okay, yeah.
Really, as a designer more than an artist.
Yeah.
So because I think the way you respond to things is different.
Yeah, definitely. So where did you train as a designer?
I studied in Aberdeen.
Oh wow. So and where are you from originally?
I am actually Scottish.
Oh.
Yes, I'm a Scottish, very English spoken designer.
Yeah.
I was born in Dunfermline in Fife. And my folks moved to Norfolk when I was about 5.
Yeah.
Stayed there until I was about 15, and then we moved to a very small fishing town in Peterhead called Peterhead, which is just north of Aberdeen. And Aberdeen is your nearest studying place, really, that you can sort of get to. It's still about an hour on a bus.
Yeah.
So I studied general art as a foundation course, and then did a textile degree. Well, it's an open degree initially. Then you have to prove your worth.
Yeah.
And pick a specialism. So it's 4 years. Yeah. It's 4 years.
And you chose textiles?
Yes. I started off thinking I'd make a great painter, but when I went to university, I realised there were so many already good ones there. So that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
And I've always liked texture, so it seems like the obvious.
Nice. What did your parents think of you going to study textiles?
Interesting one there.
This is from my own experience. Wondering what people's are like.
I would say, I mean, I come from a poverty background, so what I chose to study had no sort of like financial bearing on what they felt.
Yeah.
I also was like the first in my like family line to go to university, so studying anything would have been great.
Yeah.
The fact that I went to university and studied arts, I think they didn't really have a pick on it, a choice on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any sort of bearing. It was great that I went to university because nobody had ever gone to university.
Yeah.
And because I came from a pretty tight financial background, they weren't paying for it, so it was just great that I went to university, I think.
Oh, nice. So they were quite supportive?
Yes. Yes. Not a particularly artistic family.
Yeah.
But definitely supportive.
Oh, that's really, it makes such a difference, doesn't it, to have like your family saying, go and do what you want and we'll be there for you.
I think...
Can I turn without the arrow one?
Yes, yeah, you can. go straight on, which will take you right into the centre of town,
Okay.
or you can sort of skirt around town that way if you go. I'm dyslexic, by the way, struggle with my left and right, so I keep using
Good
my
that you're
hands.
pointing. It's a lot. Here's some traffic. Let's get in this. That's going to go right though.
Yeah, no, you can go over here, or if you want to sit in traffic, I would go right.
Let's do that then.
Yeah, and then you could do a left and you'll still be sat in traffic probably.
That's fine.
That can take you all the way around town, constantly sat in traffic.
That's good.
Yeah, so right, left, and
Okay.
more or less keep doing a left and you'll be fine.
Funny.
Yes, so that's really it in a nutshell, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So were your friends creative? Like, did they go on and do creative courses as well?
Yes. Luckily, the high school that I went to in Peterhead, I had quite because I joined when I was 15 and didn't have a peer group there. I sort of didn't really want to be there either. I sort of mixed with all sorts of people, really, and some good people, some really good people there actually. And quite a number of them went on to study different forms of creative arts. I chose to do a foundation course.
Yeah.
So the academic year that I left school at, quite a few of them went to art school in front of me, so I was a year behind them. So it was interesting watching quite a few of my school year go ahead of me.
Oh yeah.
So that was quite nice. But most of the people that I sort of, that you levitate towards, sort of people that are similar interests, don't you, really?
Yeah.
And most of those that I sat and did six-year art with, I'm still in contact with today.
Yeah.
They're all in different places. So I have a friend in London who's an arts director for one of the music companies. So do you remember when they used to design CD covers? So that's where he started. He was a year ahead of me at school. Lovely gentleman.
Yeah.
Another guy who did interior design. Again, this was a closed group that we were with at school. He stuck with interior design. He now still does interior design. He's self-employed, lives out in Holland with his wife and his children.
Yeah.
There's a whole list of them, but they all do creative things.
Yeah.
It's really nice. And then obviously I did a year at college and then a year at, the 4 years at university, but a lot of the people I went to university still practice.
Yeah.
It was really good. In fact, it's funny, I was doing a little bit of reflection yesterday. I had a friend around yesterday and she was looking at the paintings on the wall, and it was just nice thinking back. I did an MA. I took a year out and did some work and then went back and did an MA, and there's 2 pieces in the house by 2 fantastic creatives. There's 3 pieces by creatives that I did my MA with.
Yeah.
And so time disappears and you kind of forget these things. And she was asking me about these pieces in the house.
Yeah.
So there are 2 ceramic pieces by 1 artist. There was only 10 of us that did this MA.
Right.
So I got 3 pieces of work from out of 10 artists, which is actually really lovely.
Yeah.
So I got some sort of experimental glazed 2 sort of vessels, a painting that was given to me as a tray because I made her a handbag to go to a wedding, and she painted something specially for me.
Yeah.
And then one was a painting that was gifted to me because I got married straight after my MA.
Yeah.
So that was done. That's called something like the lady about to get married or something. It's called.
Sweet.
So I have these 3 pieces in the house, and so life just passes you by, and you forget about these things that are around you, don't you?
Yeah.
And actually, they're quite poignant in your life.
Yeah.
It's really quite nice. So it's nice to have somebody ask about them because you kind of forget.
About them. Yeah.
Forget, don't
You've got a
you?
little art collection on the go then.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because the lady that came round yesterday, she has been a friend for quite a few years. She's actually a doctor who trained as a fine art printmaker.
Yeah.
And she has an amazing eye, and she has a massive collection of art, but mostly in sort of felts and ceramics. so I'm not alone.
That's cool. What made you go and why did you take a year out and then go and do an MA?
Wow, now see, that's an interesting one. So you specialise in your fourth year, you choose the direction that you're in.
Yeah.
And I had chosen to sort of specialise in something that I branded as experimental textiles.
Right.
So I sort of produced these unusual materials. And as I was sort of coming out of this, I sort of recognised that, well, where do I go with this? So these are my questions. I think because you can be quite insular in that period in your life. It's just about now, the then. And I think, and that's one fundamental difference between students going to university now, is they have to think about the future ahead of that. Will that give them a job? I don't think I really thought about that, and most of my peers didn't think about that either. So as I was sort of coming through that, I didn't know, what am I going to do with this? And I thought, well, actually, really, what I was really seeing evolving was like sort of quite sophisticated, quite technical materials, people with technical understandings, and I began to feel that I'd done a creative degree, which is great, but it's not necessarily underpinned by a lot of technical understanding. And at that point, Huddersfield were offering these courses. There were MScs in textile technology for textile design graduates.
Yeah.
And I applied to do that because I thought that was going to be the next step.
Makes sense,
I got accepted. That was all great. That was fine. But the course was funded by European funding, and it was the one and only year their funding was withheld. So I started this sort of graduate research post that was coming to an end. I'd done this graduate research post in technical textiles. So although all my personal work was quite creative and quite unusual, underneath it all, I was really interested in quite sophisticated, technically advanced materials and the developments that were going on in the world.
Yeah.
And actually that's what got me my first graduate post. Not how creative I had been.
Yeah.
It was my understanding and my interest in these really quite amazing, technically astounding materials.
Right.
So you were talking about sort of ballistic wear, Kevlar, the stuff that the military were working on.
Oh, nice.
So my interest in this drove my dissertation. So I had all this creative stuff going on, but then I had this dissertation in quite technical materials, and this research role came up while I was still at university, and it was to collate, collect and research advanced materials that could potentially be injected into the company, and it was a local company who developed offshore survival wear. So they were really interested in any new materials. It didn't matter where it came from. It could be Japan, it could be anywhere, anything that was streaming out of NASA, anything.
Sorry.
No, you're okay.
Oh, it always makes me feel really emotional when ambulances go
I know,
past.
it's hard, isn't it? Because you think you've no idea what's going on in it.
No.
I know. So, as an undergrad, I was doing all this creative stuff, but I was really interested in way more technical things.
Yeah.
So I could see all these technical things, and I could really see the value in them. So I love creativity, but there was a definite bridge between the two.
Yeah.
And I sort of started to see actually having a real understanding of technical elements of textiles could definitely be the future.
Yeah.
So I did all these kind of creative and experimental things, but I did my dissertation in something very, very different.
Right.
And then I applied for this research role. They gave me that job, so I was one of the few undergrads to actually have a job to go to when I left. It was great. It was a fantastic feeling. So I worked for this company for about 8 months, speaking to people all over the world to see what they were researching and developing. It was amazing.
Exciting, yeah.
It was absolutely amazing. And then at the same time I applied to Huddersfield.
Yeah.
Got accepted to do this MSc, but then the funding's fallen through.
What happened to the funding? Why did they move?
It collapsed. They take on. I think they took on 12 students every year, and the funding was just withdrawn by the European Council that gives them funding.
Right.
So I was supposed to start in January. I think I'd finished the research post in something like, I don't know, September, October, November, something like that. There wasn't much between finishing that and then going to Huddersfield.
Yeah.
But then so in January I'd sort of like almost like got myself to go, and he just says the funding's been pulled. He said, so I've got 12 students who are ready to like move in, and there's no funding. And he was absolutely gutted. Lovely gentleman who managed the MSc.
Yeah.
And they were like completely bamboozled. Anyway, so I thought, well, it was really in my head that I wanted to study more.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, where do I go with this? So I actually looked back at the MAs and look at what I was doing. So I was still producing unusual materials. Quite a few opportunities had come up, so I was still producing these. And I thought maybe I could redevelop some new ideas and see where it evolves. So they have an open like MA in art and design. So I decided to join that. So I applied to join that and got accepted. And I think I'd been on it a week. And this gentleman from the head of department, of course, at Huddersfield, phones me and he says, Maria, we've got the funding. I know it's like 6 months late, but would you like to join us next week? And I'm like, I started MA like 2 weeks ago. And it's just like, and it was just, yeah. But you know what? Things work out the way they work out.
Yeah.
It's just, it was not meant to be.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to be. And I guess I'd have taken a different path in the end.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up doing that MA, and I just developed more ideas and played with different materials. I'd been playing with how you sort of screen different plastics to different fabrics in different states, how you maybe add different liquid plastics to knitted things, to woven things. So I could see that you could just kind of carry on playing with these ideas.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
Amazing.
So I was using like sort of like polyurethane kind of liquid polyurethane kind of stuff, and then I started switching to silicone during this MA, and that just had different properties. So when it interacted with materials, it just played in a different way.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've had a really positive experience without any, apart from the funding dropping.
Oh no, absolutely no. I had a complete and utter joyride.
Yeah.
No, totally. After that, I mean, when I did the MA, I had not long finished it. Do you need any more directions, by the way?
No, I'm all right when I'm in town. Ish.
So yeah, I'd not long finished the MA because all the fabrics were around, and I applied to, I don't know if they still do it, but there was, I don't know if it still runs, but there was the Oxo Peugeot Design Awards.
I've heard of that before.
They ran for quite a few years, so you're talking about just as the century turned. That sounds really old, doesn't it?
And I know it well.
And they had different categories. So you were talking about like exquisite sort of innovative design and craft. Let's put it like that. And so I applied for that using some of the fabrics that I had done during my MA, and I won one of the runners-up categories in the, and that was a big prestigious award. And everybody came down to London, and it was it was fab. There was a big party in London. I remember dyed quail's eggs and all sorts. I was like mad. So my work was in various newspapers. I was the only Scottish person that got that far.
Yeah.
It was fab. A photographer came up from London. It was mad. It was all this. So I have all this like imagery of myself across various newspapers and things like that. But no, because it's all very positive.
Yeah.
And I look back, and it was like people talk about your 10 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
Well, I had that for a few years.
Yeah.
Not that I was looking for that. My earlier pieces ended up as part of an exhibition, a pop-up exhibition in So my earlier fabrics, which were part of bags that I started designing, were in a pop-up gallery in London, and then they ended up being in Vogue. So I have all these little bits of things, and so they all went over a period of like maybe 5 years. And I used to send my work out to a gallery out in New York, so they'd sell some pieces. This is by the time I've been working on fabrics, but then I eventually figure out that I need to make these into something. What do I do with them? So that's what I end up doing as I make bags. So they go in a few, it's like wearable art kind of things. And it was just before the sort of peak of people making really interesting bags out of unusual kind of materials, and it just hit it just before that. And then probably in the coming years, maybe for about 5 years, there was an explosion of jewellery people making handbags with unusual finishes. There were loads of people. It happens less now, purely because most makers understand it's hard to make a living doing that. You can make a living making interesting bags if you're a Guinness.
Got the brand to go with it.
Because you've got the brand to go with it, and probably an awful lot of very expensive perfumed water as well. So you just it's how you pitch yourself within that, and being a maker. And you know, even if you outwardly look like you're selling bags at £100 a piece, by the time you realise that actually the pop-up gallery is taking 50% of that, it's not going anywhere, and it never is going to go anywhere. And I think that is why you find less makers.
Is that why you went into making bags rather than just creating the fabric designs?
No, well I went into making bags because so I just graduated. I was doing this research post, but I'd already arranged to go to New Designers in London with the rest of my, academic year. The design department had all gone, so I went for like a week to New Designers, and while I was there I had all these unusual fabrics on display, and two at the basic element of that, basic bit of that is two things came out of that. So from New Designers I got an agent who looked at my work, and she saw the more commercial stuff as well. So I did a lot of, it was anything to do with altering surfaces. So I played quite a lot with Devore, it's sort of chemical treatments where you can burn out fibres. It was part of that. So she saw that and she said, I'll have those, and can you keep supplying me? So that's what I did. So underneath everything that's gone on, I kept that agent for nearly 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
And I'd send her initially I'd send her maybe 3 collections a year, and then maybe 1 a year or something as the year sort of dwindled along, whatever I had time in between, whatever else I was doing. But the other thing that came out of that was this lady just said, I think your fabrics, they're fab, but what we're going to do with them? They need a product. And I was like, I haven't even thought of that. On the stand I had these swatches of experimental fabrics. I also tried my hand at kind of dressmaking, and I made this sort of twiggy kind of style little A-frame dress out of one of these fabrics. And I'd made a cushion, but really I had no making skills. That's not what I'd gone to college for, although in hindsight really you need that. So I thought, okay, so what product could I do? What could I make? And I thought, handbags, that'd be easy enough. I'm not kidding you. That was my thought. That'll be easy enough. And actually, I didn't actually have making skills, but I didn't realise I didn't have making skills until I tried to make these bags. I thought, this looks really terrible. Oh my God, they want to photograph this for Vogue. This is really bad. I need to get making skills. I need to know what I'm doing. As it turns out, I met this amazing woman in the midst of all this. Literally, it happened all over weeks. So this lady says, I want a product, and I'm going, I try to make a product, I can't make a product. And I meet this woman who actually, again, she makes heads things, and she makes hats and things like that. She runs a shop in Aberdeen still. Now at that point she was taking a step back and looking at studying psychology. So I met this lady in college, and I said, I need some help with these blinking bags. They're supposed to be photographed, they're supposed to be going in Vogue, and they look absolutely terrible. What am I going to do? And she's like, well, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, you need to... And so actually, she made me my first couple of samples, but she taught me how to sew.
Oh.
So that was the important thing. So I learnt from her how to sew. She did me a few samples and she told me how you make a quality product. So I didn't learn that at university. I learnt that from that lady.
All those years of university and then...
Oh, it's terrible, but actually when you look back, and that's why it's so important to it's not so important, I'd say you need to have an idea of what you think you need to study to get where you're going,
to get what you want out of it.
And I would say it was a great place to study. It was a fantastic environment. It was really very creative. I'm trying to be good here in what I say because I know I'm being recorded. I would say, looking back, as part of the assessment criteria for your degree was that you had to indicate, you know, what the product would be, what the environment would be. Obviously, it's a design course. It's not a fine art course. And really, that was a bit of an afterthought, to be quite frank. And you were never taught making skills. The demonstration on how to use a sewing machine was pretty pitiful. It was really minimal. So actually nobody was ever going to get making skills from that course. It was just purely about what the surfaces were. But when you design something, you need to know how things are constructed, and you need to understand, well, is that material appropriate for that object? Loads of other things, but that's two very basic things. So actually just understanding the surface doesn't always help. You have to have construction knowledge as well. I can turn around and say, oh yeah, I'll put that fabric on a cushion, but it could be completely useless for a cushion. So you need to have that, the two components to it, and I think that's the problem with lots of design things though. I'm just going to reset all the stuff because of the 30 minutes. Yes, go for it. I've brought tea if you want a cup of tea, and there's water as well, and Jaffa cakes. So how is it? I'm the second person you've interviewed. You are, How did you find the first one?
I was really nervous. She was really nervous. But then when I told her that I don't know if I said this, but I haven't actually prepped any questions because everyone's so different.
No, that's become quite apparent. No, in a good way. No, in a good way.
Because it's supposed to be more like a conversation and like seeing what you have to say. Did you want a cup of tea?
Yeah, should we have a cup of tea? I'm going for that.
Yeah, why not? There's a mug. You can have the mug or the top thing.
No, I'm okay. Whatever goes. However it goes. There you go. She says try not to pour all over yourself.
I don't know why this keeps saying it's like a phone call. I think because my phone's plugged in.
Oh, is this one of those ones that you can pour while it's still screwed in?
Yeah.
Right, here we go. You're alright, my dear.
Yeah, I've got sugar as well if you want it.
No, I'm good. Is that enough? You want a bit more? A bit more?
Go on a little bit. Okay, cool.
We good?
Doesn't look as good as it did in the studio.
I think tea is always a bit funny.
Yeah.
You alright? You alright there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think tea is a bit funny. I've just reminded myself actually. My husband's gizmo comes all the way down here. And I knocked over a can of fizzy juice in it 2 or 3 days ago.
Oh no.
I wonder if he's opened up and cleared it out, or he's forgotten about it.
It's mega sticky.
You just remembered that. Oh my god. I hope he's cleared it out. Well, yes. So I look back and think I had quite a good ride, really.
Yeah. Sounds like you had.
No, I did have quite a good ride. I think. I mean, like, I look back and I had work.
To hold that for a
Yeah. So I had work that was going to galleries. I had work that was going like to pop-up places. I did this research project after I left university. As I said, a long-term relationship with this company that I'd send work to, which was really good.
Yeah. 20 years. That's.
Yeah, I think I really stopped sending work to them probably a few years ago, really, and I think I got to a stage where I thought, you know what, I've had my work for such a long time. She said, you know, back in the day, she said, you were one of our sort of highest ratio sort of designers. She said the amount that you sent and how much percentage-wise actually sold.
Yeah.
Said you did really, really well, because you'd be selling at least 70 to 80% of what you sent, which is really high.
Yeah.
So, anyways, so I did okay. People see it's interesting because people often ask me, why don't you sell work? But what people don't know is where I've come from. I've already done that. I feel like I've done enough of that.
Yeah.
And it's not something I really have any drive to do.
Yeah, after you've done something for a few years, you need to try something new.
Yeah, I think we ended up moving to London, so I was in the middle of... We left Aberdeen a bit. I ended up doing a little bit of teaching after I did this MA, to help somebody out, actually. And I quite liked it. I was completely untrained. So it was quite nice. I was teaching the foundation course that I had done 4 years before.
Oh, nice.
And it was interesting to do that. But in a month, sort of having done this MA, doing this little bit of teaching, developing these bags, and that I've sent them a few places. They're selling in different places. I thought, I wonder if I could do commercial bag design without any training. So I ended up getting this job in London as a high street fashion bag designer, and it was a really good experience. It's just an environment that's not suited to me. I'm kind of pretty much, you get what you see on the tin. People like that. People aren't like that there. That's really not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
So I did that maybe for about 8 months or something like that. The people in the environment were quite soul destroying. Even to each other. That was really weird, let alone being a newcomer. But they weren't good with newcomers. Really strange dynamics, but really good experience because it meant that I could draw like designs for things. So that was a really good experience. I really quite enjoyed that, and sort of took a step back from that, and we moved up here, so I was selling work to an agent, still doing that at the agent's work. And then my husband was they were shutting their offices down in Barnet. I started doing a little bit of teaching when I was in London, and I thought, where are we going to go? He says, well, you have to go to Warrington or you have to go to Hamilton. I was like, I'm not going to Hamilton.
I have no idea what Hamilton's like.
It's not one of the best places to live if you have an English accent.
Where is it?
It's on the outskirts of Glasgow.
Right, okay.
That's how I would see it, and that was certainly the experience of my mother-in-law. Not that I have ever experienced any racism at all. Obviously, moving from Scotland to England, I didn't really experience that, and I didn't particularly experience as a teenager moving back to a very small Scottish town.
Yeah.
But I did not get a good feeling at the idea of moving to Hamilton because of the bits of things I'd heard. I said, we'll just have to go to Warrington, wherever that is. So that's what we do. So that's how we ended up here. Yeah.
And you've got kids, right?
Yep. So I moved to Warrington, and a friend of mine who lives in Manchester at the time, she said, Marie, you were enjoying the teaching? She said, because I think I may have seen a really good job for you in the Manchester Evening News. I said, well, go and send me the ad over. So she sent me it in a letter. Do you remember those things?
Yeah.
Actually in a letter.
Still write them.
She cut out the clipping and sent it to me.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And there was this job at in Blackburn. They want a sort of a course leader for the level 1 in the HND in textile design. I thought, well, I don't really know if I've got enough experience for that. I'd done a little bit of teaching in London. I did a teensy bit in Aberdeen, but I had no qualifications. But I really did quite like it. So I'm still sending work off to the agents. I'm still doing bits of things. Haven't made any bags in a while. Applied for this job in Blackburn and got this job in Blackburn. So I did that for nearly 5 years. Fell pregnant, tried to do it for a bit longer. I fell pregnant when about 4 years into the role, something like that. So I worked for about 1.5 years with Charlie, and then just thought it was getting too much. It was too far to drive. So I decided, I sort of begged my boss to see if she'd let me do 1 day a week. Remember, you can't manage a course on 1 day a week. Don't be daft. I thought, yeah, I really like this job. It's really good. Right, no, I need to just let it go. So I let it go because it was a permanent contract, teaching every area that I really like.
Yeah.
So I taught sort of technical textile technology. I also taught sort of some of the creative projects, some of the stitch projects. Taught bag making, of course. And I taught professional practice, which was a really good unit, and computer-aided design for textile designers. And I really enjoyed that. So, and it was a permanent contract. It was a permanent contract.
It must have been quite scary letting it go then.
It was actually. It was quite scary letting it go. I thought, I have to let this go. So I let that go, quite sadly.
Oh.
Quite sadly let that go, but it was the right thing to do at the time. So since then, between that and really sort of Charlie starting school, I did a couple of little commission pieces, little bits and bobs. But really it's quite difficult to do that with small kids. Unless you used to really focus on it, and I don't really have the space at home. So I did bits of things over the years, little sort of personal commissions for people, and that's as far as I took it. And then, of course, when Charlie starts school and people find out that you've got a creative background, oh God, you don't work. Bloody hell.
Can you do this for me? Can you do that?
Yeah, so I ended up teaching Year 5's felt making, doing sort of quirky like drawing workshops with Year 6's. I think for about 3 years, if I wasn't with Charlie, the school hours were pretty much filled with doing work for free for various schools. I ran a whole arts week for Charlie's primary school. Oh, it was just bonkers. And then you get to a stage where you think people just keep taking the mickey, but schools are under-resourced and they've got no money. But I kind of got to a stage where I thought, I have to stop doing this. And I started putting my foot down and saying, I'm not taking any jobs on that aren't in some way paid, because, you know, at the end of the day, it just devalues everybody.
Yeah.
So I did that until Amber was around. No, I'm good, thank you. So I did.
It's not quite the weather for it, is it?
Unpaid arts work, I think, in schools for probably the best part of about 6 years. I said 4 to 6 years, I think. And then, no, it's not good.
There's some water there if you want water as well.
I'm good, thank you. And then, as the kids get older, I started doing a few more commissions.
Yeah.
And then,
so did having kids ever, like, I presume it kind of slows what you're doing down a bit?
I think it's a choice that you make.
Yeah.
I am not blaming my kids.
Of course.
I have chose to have children, so there go. If I'm choosing to have children, I should be with them.
Yeah.
So that's really my kind of take on it.
Yeah.
So I remember my mum saying something similar years and years ago, something about the kids putting a stop to, you know, whatever you choose to do or however you get educated.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't see it like that. You know, you make choices in the world. What's the point in having kids if you're not spending time with them?
Yeah.
I kind of that's how I saw it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm probably being quite selective on my take on this because you're recording this as well. And so that's just what I thought anyway.
Yeah.
you're limited between what you can do between 9:30 and 2:30
Right.
of a day. When
Yeah.
you're sleep deprived anyway.
Yeah, of course. I imagine lots of my friends are having babies at the minute, so I'm getting to see bits of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to step back and observe other people.
Yeah.
And I think you can never really kind of...
You cannot.
You can't
imagine.
you can't imagine
I can't
it.
empathise at all.
No.
Because, yeah, it's...
Do you know something that I remember as a tutor when I was at Blackburn? This is before I had Charlie. There was student A, who was a mature student, and student A had a 3-year-old child, 2 to 3-year-old child, and student A was approaching their end of term sort of assessments and was running behind, you know, keeping up. Student A approached me and said, I'm struggling to keep up because my daughter's got chickenpox. She's been unwell for about 2 weeks, and I'm really struggling to keep up. She didn't say any more than that, but that means she is sleep deprived and worn out, and she's trying to manage her coursework, and she asked me for an extension, and I just said, you just have to keep up with everybody else. And I look back and go, oh my God, I had no clue what the impact on a child having chickenpox might be on your life.
Yeah.
And actually, it's quite severe. I mean, before we had kids, I watched my friends' children. Their daughter had chickenpox, and this little girl was so uncomfortable as a baby. I think she was about 8 months old then. She was trying to scratch and claw at her whole entire body. How does that work over like the period of a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
If you're trying to study, or you know, because a creative course is never, you know, it's not 9 till 4, is it?
No.
You're taking it home. You're trying to do bits probably when your kids are in bed.
Yeah.
And that just obviously wasn't going to happen. And I said no. And I now know from having kids, it just doesn't work like that. You can't keep up.
But then that's like, just to make you feel a bit better, if she was going for a job in the real world, and if she couldn't deliver it, then they might go with someone else, you know. So
yes, no, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah,
there.
I know
still
what you
felt
mean.
heartless.
I know.
Looking back, look back. Oh my God, I
bless.
can't believe I did that. If I had Charlie by then, I'd be like, yeah, take an extra 2 weeks, love. Check in with me in a couple of weeks and we'll see where we're at. That's what I probably would have done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just didn't get it at all.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not good.
Never mind. So shall I tell you what I'm kind of
Yeah, would you like to tell me what you're doing?
So I've got a show in October. So to think of some ideas earlier on in the year, I spent some time in the gallery and in the archive, Warrington Museum archive. And the main, the large art gallery, as they call it, I noticed that every single piece of artwork in there was made by a male, except for one contemporary piece, which is by Grayson Perry, who does like to dress like a lady, but he's still male. And in the at the end of the room, kind of like under the stairwell, for the past year has been like a temporary exhibition of 21 astounding women who've got these kind of like connections to Warrington.
Yes, there is, isn't there?
Yeah, they've just taken it down now, which is a shame because it would have been nice to have it up for the show. So this massive room was dedicated to this handful of male artists, and this tiny under the stairs exhibition was dedicated to these 21 women. So I wanted to kind of like highlight that and find out more about if there are any barriers that women these days are still kind of facing within their practice, or have faced throughout their kind of career path, and whether there's been kind of like people that have influenced your decisions or kind of put barriers in the way. That's
really interesting. And I think that's a good one for you to do the interview first and then pose that. I think that's a really good way around doing it. I would personally say no. I don't ever feel like there's been anybody that stuck any barriers up. I think barriers get stuck up by people themselves. It's kind of how I see it. That might be a little bit, I don't know, maybe there's a word for that. You know, people build their own opportunities. That's kind of how I see life.
Yeah.
That might sound like I'm talking with a silver spoon stuck somewhere.
It's been really evident through what you've said, because as soon as something's, you've not been able to go down one route, you've just found another way of doing something. So
I think you have to, because otherwise what happens is you go into some sort of psychological meltdown.
Yeah.
So if you've spent like 10 years visualising yourself as a vet, and for some reason you get into vet school and you go, oh my god, I can't, this is sad, I'm spending most of my time putting animals down. You have to reevaluate. You can't shut down. You have to look, well, where do I move from this?
Yeah.
And I actually think it's I think as a sort of a psychological response to the modern day, I think it's a growing response as well, that people have breakdowns and don't move forward. That's my experience anyway, teaching the people that I do. I find that there is definitely a growing, I'm trying to be careful how I say this. There's definitely lots of sort of young people out there who've certainly put a lot of stake in something. They've really committed to something, and I think part of that is the fact that if you're going to go to university, you've got to know what you're studying, because you've got to pay for it. And I think there's a big change in how we went to school. And how we went into further education, higher education. It wasn't always about thinking about the end result. Now you're forced to think about the end result when you're much younger.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is you end up visualising yourself in a certain role at a very young age, with no necessarily thoughts on, well, what am I going to do if that doesn't work out?
Yeah.
And if you've psychologically invested in this vision of yourself, but there aren't any back doors.
Yeah.
I can see why people kind of break down.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot. I'm obviously not that kind of person.
Yeah.
I don't know how we stop that from happening to people.
No, I'm not,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I just don't know how many people it happens to. We're heading back to yours, so do we need to be in the...
Yeah, you can go that way. If you get stuck getting around the roundabout, you can always go up to the next roundabout and take a right at the next roundabout. But if you can wing it...
I've got like this dodgy neck at the minute, so walking around the right. It's alright, don't worry.
No, as long as you're okay, that's
just like a stiff board trying to look out the window.
But yeah, I don't feel like anybody's put any barriers in. I mean, if anybody wants to pick holes in what I've just said in the last sort of half an hour, you can go either way from here, by the way.
Oh yeah, okay.
You might turn around and say, well, do you not feel like having children has put barriers in? And I would say no, that I chose to have children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how are they a barrier? Because I chose to have kids.
Yeah.
And I think you can't do everything well.
Yeah.
You have to pick and choose. At some point you have to make a choice.
Yeah.
I think it's great if you can pin down working a full-time job and underpinning 2 kids.
Yeah.
If you can do that efficiently well without cracking up, good on you. I don't think I could.
Yeah.
So you have to pick it, really.
I suppose it's going back to what you were asking before. We're going right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do we kind of like stop it from happening? Maybe it's about getting them to think from a younger age, all the things. Yeah. So as part of the show, I'm hoping to work with some local Girl Guide groups and just find out what it is that they enjoy in life and how they might take that forward before they start getting
too tied
influenced
in
by influenced by their kind of like parents' decisions and their teachers' decisions about what it is they're good at.
Yeah.
Too often you can be kind of like, oh, you're really good at maths, so you should go and do maths. But actually, this kid enjoys dancing or something.
Yeah, I am completely with you there, and I also think even if you are good at maths, I think if you're good at any academic subjects. By the way, my studio's down this road, just so you know. So we're down there in an old school. Just so you know if you're passing. Yeah, Fairfield Old School.
Okay, yeah. Roger's there as well, isn't he?
I do believe he does frequent there for certain personal interests. I understand that he's part of a music group as a guest. But
hop in. I'm on Museum Street where we were parked up. So
yes. But yeah, I think, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I'm actually done quite well today, because usually if I stop, I'm never going to get back on where I was talking about. So I'm obviously getting more sleep now. I must be, before that's managed to take place. Anyway, I forgot what I was waffling on about. Do you want to pick a subject?
We were talking about pick a subject.
You pick any subject. Anything you like.
We were talking. I was telling you how I was working with Girl Guide groups, and so a kid might be good at maths, but then prefer to dance, or as just an example.
I think that most people who do, you couldn't say this, but I think this is good for most people who are academic, delving into a bit of creativity or a bit of something that disengages your mind from a sense of time and the now is really very, very beneficial. And I think more sort of academic people would probably benefit from that than, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's like a balanced diet, isn't it? Having a little bit of everything.
I think so. Even if you want to study physics and maths, let's say, I think, picking up a GCSE in art isn't necessarily, if you're at school. I think that's a good thing. I think there's a growing change again, because parents are probably going to feel like they're contributing to kids financially for their education, or they're worried about their kids having a big bill when they leave. Lots of kids I know are getting advised not to take creative subjects, regardless of how good they feel they are at it, or regardless of how actually good they are at it, because they feel like if they're good at that anyway, they can fall back on that. So I'm hearing this from quite a lot of parents, which is worrying.
It's such a shame.
It is a shame. I mean, if it's highly unlikely that my son's going to turn around and say, I want to study sculpture or something like that. But if he did pose that to me, what would I say? I'd say, go for it. I think you'd have to, because I wasn't stopped from doing that. Granted, my parents didn't pay for it. I was the last academic year that got student grants as well as fees covered, so but I still wouldn't stop him from doing it.
So it's the teachers then that are advising the parents not to take.
No, I don't think it's the teachers. I think it's the parents saying, right, if we've got 40 grand's worth of debt potentially here, you need to know exactly what you're studying. We'd rather you didn't study painting, because we don't think you're going to make a great painter. Well, they might not say that, but they're going to say chances of you becoming the next, Andy Goldsworth is probably pretty limited. And actually, in truth, they're probably correct. Statistically speaking, you can probably make a career in the NHS, in law, in any one of those, over being in any form of fine art. I mean, granted, you could probably look statistically down like creative subjects. You could probably make a good career as like a contract musician. You could probably make a good career in some form of graphics, potentially ceramics, jewellery making. But the further down the list of creative subjects you get, and the more fine art you get. And that is, I'm not in any way being critical of that. I think, I'm sure somebody could pull out the statistics somewhere. But you can do it. It's just hard. It's hard.
And a longer slog, I think.
It's a longer slog, and you'll be broke for a lot longer, so it depends. And I think a lot of parents are saying, well, look, if you're good at that anyway, why don't you just do that because you're particularly good at maths or physics, and do a degree in, I don't know, structural engineering. But you can always do a little bit of drawing in the back, 'cause, that's a hobby, and that's kind of what I'm hearing. So I don't know. I mean, it's had a massive impact. Debbie, who's in Fairfield next to me, she was explaining to me when I moved in at Christmas that if you want to go and study like 3D design or ceramics, because people are not picking to do creative subjects at university level,
Yeah.
that the ceramics departments are shutting down across faculties.
Yeah.
And this surely is an impact on the fact that people have to pay for their own fees. And parents are going, well, look, I'd rather you train as a lawyer than a painter
Yeah.
if we're going to have to pay for it. And it is as simple as that.
Yeah.
So let's probably just presume that we're just going to have a lot more crazy kind of like manic people, because they're all sat behind desks, not being creative in any way whatsoever, when that's really what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be an outburst of them in like 40 years where all of a sudden they all just drop out of these
Yeah, they're all going to
high-paid
There'll
jobs.
be no bankers, there'll be no solicitors, they're just all going to completely drop out.
Yeah,
No politicians. Hey, that could be an interesting one. All these politicians that want to be artists or something like that.
That's a great project idea.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, that sounds like an interesting project. So where are you from, by the way?
From Anglesey. It's down here.
Yes, it is. Well done.
Yeah, I'm from Anglesey, and then I did my foundation in Bangor, or in Menai Bridge. And then I moved to Liverpool to do my undergrad, stayed there for 10 years, and then I moved to Manchester to do my MFA, stayed there for,
What's an MFA?
It's like an MA, but it's a year longer.
Ah, right.
I don't know if it's more recognised in America. I don't know. So I did that at MMU.
Right.
It's called a Master of Fine Arts.
And
Even though it was in graphic design, not art direction. So my background's in graphic design.
I was just going to say, what's your specialism? It's graphics.
Graphics. But I've always used like domestic craft techniques as hobbies. Like I've always knitted, sewed, all that kind of stuff. So now I kind of merge the two, I guess.
I think, you see, that's something that I respond a lot to. Contrasts. So without even kind of, you're talking about a graphic specialism with crafts.
Yeah.
I think, that sounds interesting. How do
Yeah.
you work that one? And to me, that sounds very exciting. It's a bit like saying, sorry, how do you put silicone with hand knit? How do you do that?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing.